Friends, before starting the story, if you are new to my channel, then please like this video and subscribe to the channel, and also tell me in the comments where you are listening to this story from. I never wanted to tell this story. For most of my life, I tried to bury it somewhere in the cracked roads of the American Midwest, hoping if I ignored it long enough, the memory would finally rot away like some long-forgotten ghost town. But the truth is, that night has never left me. It clings to my skin like tar, and no matter how many miles I drive or how many years I live, the sound of that endless highway and what waited for us out there crawls right back into my head the second I close my eyes. It started 3 summers ago, in July. I was 22, restless, and stupidly nostalgic for a time I thought I could get back just by hitting the open road. My 2 closest friends, Evan and Michelle, had been nagging me for months to do something reckless before the weight of jobs, bills, and responsibility pinned us down for good. So, what better way than a cross-country road trip? Just the 3 of us, a beat-up silver Chevy Impala, and a playlist loud enough to make the rearview mirror tremble. At first, it was exactly what you'd imagine. Long desert highways stretching flat and endless under skies too wide to be real. Gas stations glowing like sacred temples in the night. Coffee cups balanced between greasy food wrappers. We were alive in a way you can only be when you're too young to know that nothing lasts forever. But that was before we took that turn. We were somewhere in Nebraska, rolling steady on I-80 just outside a town with a name I don't even remember now. It was close to midnight, the sky smothered with heavy clouds and no moon in sight. Michelle was asleep in the back, her head tipped against the window, hair plastered across her face from the humid air. Evan was driving, his knuckles tight on the steering wheel because he always got tense after dark. The GPS said to keep following I-80, but for reasons I don't think I'll ever fully understand, the screen suddenly blinked out and rebooted. When it came back on, it showed a different route, a side road cutting south into what looked like nothing but farmland. Bold purple arrows pointed us off the interstate. "That's weird," I remember saying. "We're not rerouting, are we?" Evan shook his head. "Nope, didn't touch anything." I could feel the vibration of the tires over the asphalt, steady, consistent. But then the road signs started thinning out. First every 10 minutes, then every 30. Eventually, there were no signs at all, just a narrow strip of cracked pavement, the headlights carving 2 pale tunnels into a landscape that didn't seem to change no matter how far we went. Michelle woke up around 1 in the morning. "Where the hell are we?" she mumbled, rubbing her eyes. "Shortcut," Evan muttered. His tone was clipped, defensive, like even admitting he'd followed the map was putting him on edge. But it was already too late to turn around, because, and I swear I'm telling this exactly as it happened, the road behind us didn't exist anymore. I looked back, expecting to see the faint glimmer of the interstate in the distance. Instead, all I saw was darkness. Not just night, not just empty fields. It was like the blackness was alive, swelling up where the road should have been, swallowing everything past the red glow of our taillights. That was the moment I knew we weren't just lost. The deeper we drove, the narrower the road became. It wasn't gradual either. It was as if someone had stretched asphalt into a ribbon and left it to rot between the fields. The double yellow lines in the middle cracked into fragments until they vanished completely. On either side, the land was flat and empty, but it didn't feel like farmland anymore. It was too dark, too still. Not the kind of silence you get when everyone's asleep, but the kind where you start to feel like even the insects don't trust the air enough to move. Michelle leaned forward between the seats, her voice low and strained. "Guys, I don't like this. Where's the last town? Did anyone see the last exit?" Evan just shook his head. "Doesn't matter. GPS says this cuts back onto the highway in another 20 miles. He tapped the glowing screen, but his knuckles were tight, pale against the steering wheel. 20 miles. I told myself we could manage that. Just 20 minutes of black road, maybe a few bumps along the way, and we'd be back under fluorescent signs and the predictable ugliness of gas stations. But mile after mile, nothing changed. There weren't even landmarks. No barns, no fences, no trees. Just black fields stretching flat on both sides, lit only by our headlights. I tried the radio out of habit, but every station was nothing but static. Not the fuzzy kind that comes when you're between frequencies. This was different. It sounded wet, like whispering underwater. I switched it off quickly. Michelle was staring out the back window now. "Does it feel like we're being followed?" she asked quietly. Her words hung in the stale air of the car. Evan snorted in that way he always did when he didn't want to admit he was scared. If we were being followed, we'd see headlights, wouldn't we? But the truth was, maybe not, because the blackness behind us didn't behave right. Every time I looked back, it seemed closer, like the horizon had shrunk or been eaten. Sometimes I thought I saw movement inside it, shapes bending, stretching like smoke caught in the light of the taillights before vanishing again. We stopped talking for a while. Around mile 15, we saw the first sign of something human, a billboard. The headlights caught the bones of it in the distance. I almost cheered at the sight, but when we passed it, my stomach knotted. It wasn't an advertisement anymore. The wood was blistered and gray, the paint peeled in ragged streaks. Only one phrase was still legible across its surface in faded red: "Turn back." Michelle saw it too. She gripped the seat between us so hard, her fingernails made a tearing sound against the fabric. "Nope, we're going back, right now. Turn around, Evan." "There's nowhere to turn around," he snapped. And he was right. The road was too narrow, the fields too soft and uneven. We didn't even know what was in those fields, or if they had an end. That was when the GPS voice spoke up again. "In 2 miles, your destination will be on the left." We froze. Even Michelle stopped breathing. None of us had entered a destination. None of us had touched the screen since it glitched. "What?" Evan began, but his voice failed when the glow on the GPS shifted. Instead of a map with roads and distances, the display showed an image, a live image. It was us. The screen showed our car from somewhere above, headlights cutting into the black. I could see Michelle's hair falling across her face in the back seat, Evan's hand clenched on the wheel, my reflection in the passenger glass. The angle wasn't possible. It was being filmed from the sky above us, like we were insects pinned to a board, and something was watching. "Stop! Stop the car!" Michelle whispered. Her nails had broken against the seat. Evan's foot didn't even move. He looked hypnotized, his eyes glazed at the screen like he couldn't pull them away. I had to slam my hand against his arm before he jolted and slowed. The tires screamed against the pavement as he forced us to a shaky stop. Silence swallowed us again. The engine rumbled low, the headlights hummed, but there was nothing else. No wind, no animals, no sense of the world moving past us, like everything had been switched off outside the car. Then the smell hit us. It was faint at first, sweet, metallic, and rotten at the same time, like meat left out in summer heat, tangled with the thick stench of gasoline. I turned toward the fields. Shapes were standing there. At first I thought my eyes were tricking me. Outlines against the dark, tall, thin, not quite human, but close enough to make me doubt. They didn't move. They didn't sway. They just leaned slightly forward, as if straining to hear us through the glass. Evan cursed under his breath and slammed his foot down. The Impala shrieked forward again, the headlights jarring across the endless scar of pavement. The GPS still glowed, and I couldn't stop from looking. The bird's-eye view on the display was zooming out now, as though whatever was watching wanted us to see more. Square after square of black countryside was pulled into the frame, but sprinkled across it were clusters of pale ovals, groups of those same tall, thin things standing in the fields, waiting. They were everywhere, stretching in every direction, positioned like grave markers on a grid. And in the center, ahead of us, was a blur, the screen labeled simply, "Your destination." Michelle was crying now, but not loudly. She had her face pressed into her knees, like she was trying to fold inside herself. I couldn't blame her. My chest felt crushed, my thoughts stuck between "there's no way this is real" and "make it stop, make it stop." We should have cut the GPS. We should have thrown it out the window, torn the wires, anything to end the sight of that glowing map. But it was like none of us could. The screen anchored us, the same way headlights anchor a deer. "In half a mile," the voice whispered. It didn't sound digital anymore. It sounded like someone else was in the car with us. A woman's voice, wet and low, laughing between the words. I realized then that we hadn't passed another billboard, another sign, another marker in almost 30 minutes. But the car clock swore minutes were slipping forward. We were trapped. "In 400 feet, your destination will be on the left." And that when we saw it. At the edge of the headlights, peeling out of the dark like bone breaking through flesh, was an old motel. The neon sign above it flickered weakly, the letters broken and half blacked out, so it just read, "Hotel." The parking lot was cracked and flooded in spots, the puddles black mirrors shining back our beams. 5 cars sat abandoned there, all different decades, all rusted and dust-strangled, like they'd been parked for years, untouched. But the windows were lit. Every single one. Yellow light glowed through the curtains, pulsing faintly like veins under skin. Something inside me whispered, not in words, but in dread, that if we drove past, the road wouldn't continue. That there was no road, not anymore. That the blackness behind us would catch up and eat us whole if we tried. But if we stopped, we would have to go inside. The decision wasn't really ours to make. That became clear the moment Evan tried to press harder on the gas. The engine roared, the tires spun, but the speedometer didn't climb past 15 miles an hour. It was like the road itself was dragging us back, funneling us toward that motel like water down a drain. "No, no, no, keep driving," Michelle sobbed, clutching the back of my seat so hard I thought she'd rip the fabric. "I am driving," Evan snarled back, sweat beading across his forehead. His jaw locked, and for a second I thought he might actually snap the wheel and send us into one of those black fields. But the thought of what waited in those fields was worse, so none of us said it aloud. The headlights touched the front stairs of the motel now. Stone steps, cracked and swollen with weeds, led up to double glass doors. The glass reflected our beams, blinding us to whatever might be inside. The GPS chimed sweetly. "You have arrived." and then it shut itself off. Complete darkness filled the inside of the car except for the headlights. The silence after the mechanical voice was heavier than before, almost suffocating. The Chevy shuddered once, then killed itself. Engine off, lights off, dashboard flat. Even though the keys were still twisted in the ignition, the car was dead. I don't know how long we sat there in the dark. Maybe 10 seconds, maybe 30. But when I blinked, I noticed the motel windows again. Yellow lights, every one of them, glowing brighter than they had when we first saw them. Not flickering anymore, pulsing. Almost like they were breathing. "Don't get out," Michelle whispered. It barely escaped her throat. "Please, don't get out." But, as if on cue, something knocked on the driver's window. A single, sharp tap. We all screamed at once. Evan nearly jumped out of his seat, ramming his shoulder into the glass. My hand flew against the dashboard instinctively, searching for some reaction that never came. There was no shape, no person outside the car, just black glass, our own wide-eyed reflections staring back. Then, the handle on my door shifted. I swear to God I heard it, the faint rattle of the latch, the subtle tug, not violent, but testing, like fingers brushing to see if it was open. I locked it without thinking, slamming my palm against the switch. All of us did, every door thunking shut in rapid clicks. And then, silence again. My pulse pounded so hard in my ears, it took me several seconds to realize there was music playing. A scratchy little tune, the kind you'd hear on a phonograph in one of those Depression-era dance halls. Soft, tinny jazz drifting faintly from the motel itself. It shouldn't have carried across the parking lot, but it did. The air was too still for echo, too dense for fading. The sound slid through the dark, straight into the car, weaving around us like smoke. "There are people inside," Evan whispered, though his tone was hollow, more like he was saying it to himself than to us. "People in there. That's why the lights are on. That's why the music's on." He didn't believe it even as he said it. Neither did we. But then, we saw movement inside the motel. Through the lit curtains of the ground floor windows, silhouettes shifted. Tall shapes gliding smoothly past the panes. Not walking, gliding. Too fast one second, too slow the next, like watching nightmarish projections. And then, one of the curtains moved. A hand. Thin, pale, impossibly long-fingered. It pulled the curtain slightly aside, not to wave or threaten, but to beckon. A curl of fingers, once, twice. "Don't," Michelle gasped. She grabbed Evan's arm, shaking it frantically. "Do not move." But the car forced us. The locks all snapped up, every single one. The key turned itself in the ignition, killing any last desperate thought we had of escape. The car wasn't ours anymore. There was only one choice left. I don't remember deciding to open the door. I just remember cold air flooding against my skin, so bitter it bit straight into my teeth. Evan stumbled out next, clenching his fists like he'd fight whoever or whatever greeted us. Michelle resisted, clutching the headrest, but then her door creaked and groaned until she screamed and bolted free, too scared to stay trapped inside. The three of us stood there in the parking lot. Gravel crunched under our shoes. The motel loomed over us, silent, except for its pulsing golden windows and that warbling jazz tune stretching endlessly from inside. The air smelled thicker here. Not rot, not gasoline, something else, like mildew soaked into ancient carpet. The shapes behind the curtains shifted again, moving from window to window. The music swelled louder. And then, the glass doors hissed open. Warm air seeped out, not comforting warm, but choking, like stepping too close to an engine exhaust. Inside, a lobby waited. For a split moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd been overreacting. Maybe this was some crumbling roadside motel that the GPS stumbled on, and the messed up vibes were just exhaustion and fear clouding our senses. But then I saw the man at the front desk. He was waiting for us. His suit was decades out of date, faded navy with a pinstripe tie, but spotless, pressed, not a wrinkle. His skin looked stretched thin, pale, with the faintest grayish tint. And when he smiled, his teeth were too small, each one pinched sharp like a row of needles. "Welcome," he rasped, though his lips barely moved. The words slid out sharp and wet, like something crawling across tile. "We've been expecting you." Michelle gagged and clutched my sleeve, burying her face. Evan froze, hands trembling but fists still clenched like a dog trapped between fight and flight. I just stared, my veins turned to ice. Because behind that man, the rest of the lobby shimmered. I don't know how else to describe it. The floor looked solid, a plush red carpet. The ceiling sloped down with a chandelier dripping golden light. But if you looked too long at the walls, at the shadows, they swam, they shifted. The motel wasn't just a building, it was a mouth, and we were already halfway down its throat. The man stepped aside from the front desk, bowing slightly. His voice thinned into static, as though too far away to be real. "Your rooms are ready." That was when Michelle broke. She screamed, raw and wild, and bolted back toward the car. Evan lunged to grab her, but before he could, every single light in the motel windows went black. The parking lot drowned in shadow. And then, the doors behind us slammed shut. We were inside. The slam of the motel doors echoed like thunder. I spun toward them, already clawing at the glass, but it was solid, heavier than any door had a right to be. Not glass anymore either, not really. My palms pressed against it, and instead of smooth cold, I felt something softer. The surface yielded, like pressing on thick, damp leather. When I pulled away, it left behind no smudge, no trace that I'd even touched it. "Open it!" Michelle's voice broke into a shriek, her fists hammering beside mine. "Let us out! Let us out!" But the door didn't so much as shudder. Behind us, the lobby hummed faintly, a low electrical noise under the floor, like wires burning deep in the walls. "Stop," Evan hissed suddenly, dragging her back by the shoulders. His knuckles were white, his eyes darting left and right. "Look around. Just look." And for the first time, I really did. The motel lobby stretched wider than it had seemed through the doors. The chandelier overhead should have lit the entire room, but instead, its glow only made patches of the carpet bright, while other spots sank into unnatural darkness, defying the light altogether. To our left, twin staircases wound upward in a curling split, melting into the shadows of the second floor. To our right lay a lounge area, mismatched armchairs around a stone fireplace that burned with no flame, only coals that pulsed like deep red organs. Above the mantel hung a mirror that didn't quite reflect us right. Our movements lagged half a second slower inside it. The man at the front desk was still smiling. He hadn't moved since we came in, but his head had tilted just slightly, as though he were studying us the way a butcher studies cuts of meat. Michelle choked out words between gulps of air. We're leaving. I don't care. There is no leaving, the man said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the room like dust through a sunbeam. Evan clenched his fists tighter. You'd better unlock those doors before... The man raised a finger. It was impossibly long, stretching bone thin, as though it were made of wax being pulled. He tapped his lips once. Shh. And Evan froze. Not just froze, he locked up. His body went rigid, jaw sealed shut, eyes bulging with fury. I grabbed at him, tried to shake him, but he was stuck, skin trembling like something was controlling him from the inside. Michelle collapsed onto her knees, sobbing into her hands. My mouth was dry, but I forced words out. What do you want from us? The man's smile broadened, his tiny pinched teeth glinting oddly against the golden light. Want? No. The question isn't what we want from you. The question... He leaned forward just slightly, and I swear I felt his breath even across the lobby, cold and damp. I don't know what you left behind to bring you here. I didn't understand. None of it made sense. But as he said it, the shadows in the room shifted. The dark patches on the carpet swirled faintly, as if something moved underneath. And then a new sound bloomed, faint at first, then louder. Footsteps. Not human footsteps, the uneven clattering of too many feet, skittering in patterns too quick to follow. Michelle screamed again, stumbling to her feet, clutching me with trembling fingers. The clerk didn't move, not so much as a blink. He simply gestured toward the staircase. Your rooms are prepared. You need only check in. I shook my head. We're not staying here. Everyone stays here, he replied gently. Some for a night, some for all eternity. The house decides which. The skittering grew louder. I looked behind him, past the desk, toward a hallway fading into dim sconces. Shapes moved back there. Tall, lean, bending at angles that made my bones ache to watch. They paced just out of full sight, their limbs folding and unfolding too many times. Evan let out a muffled grunt, the first sound since he'd frozen, and his fists twitched like he was breaking free. I shook him again, desperate, until finally he snapped loose. His knees buckled, breath rasping hard in his throat. Run? He gasped. The idea hadn't crossed me until that second. Run where? The road behind us was gone. The door was no door anymore, and the motel itself shifted from one glance to the next. But waiting wasn't an option either, not with what clawed just out of sight. Stairs, I said. My voice came out harder than I expected. Upstairs, just go. We bolted for the staircase. The man at the desk didn't stop us. His voice slunk after our footsteps instead. Go on, little moths. There's always a flame waiting. The stairs groaned under our weight, each step bowing inward as though rotten. Michelle nearly tripped in her panic, but I grabbed her arm and hauled her along. Evan took the lead, teeth clenched, refusing to look back. Halfway up, the chandelier above us shuddered, and every light in it popped at once, tiny explosions rattling glass down onto the carpet below. The only light left came from glowing sconces on the second floor, pale yellow, flickering in rhythmic patterns like heart monitors. We reached the landing, breathing like we'd crossed a desert. The hallway stretched in both directions, lined with doors. Each had numbers etched in tarnished brass, 201 through 220 on one side, 221 through 240 on the other. But the numbers warped if you looked too long, bending into symbols that I didn't recognize, shapes that moved on their own. More than that, the hallway was wrong. It breathed. I could hear the walls inhale faintly, expanding, then collapsing slow, like lungs filling with damp earth. The carpet twitched beneath my shoes in strange pulses. Michelle gripped my wrist. "Please, please tell me this isn't real." I wanted to say it wasn't, that we were dreaming, that exhaustion made us hallucinate, but my skin burned where she held me. My breath bit sharp against my ribs. Every part of this was real, and for some reason, I knew it was only beginning. One of the doors down the left hallway clicked open. No hand touched it. It just slid gently ajar, a thin band of light spilling out. Fainter music leaked through, another jazz tune, warped and distant like it came from a gramophone in a coffin. Evan squared his shoulders. If staying in a room gets us out of this, maybe we have to play along. Michelle shook violently. "No, that's exactly what it wants." Neither of them were wrong. The open door waited. Behind us, from downstairs, the sound of skittering feet had returned, louder, climbing, too many legs dragging up stone. We didn't have a choice. And so, we stepped into the open room. The door creaked wider as we approached, its single brass number barely legible in the dim light, 203. The moment Evan pushed it open, a wave of air drifted out, thick with mildew and something sweeter beneath it, like candied fruit left too long to rot. The room looked ordinary at first glance, a standard motel room, complete with a double bed tucked under scratchy sheets, a nightstand with a dusty lamp, and a sagging dresser with a bolted-down television. Beige wallpaper peeled at the edges. The carpet was stiff with age. For a breathless second, I thought maybe it was just a normal room. Creepy, abandoned, but normal. Then the lamp flickered on by itself. A hum rose in the walls, deep and low, vibrating through the floor into my shoes. The TV clicked alive in a sudden burst of static, the screen fluttering with black and white snow, before slowly sharpening into an image. And on it was us. Not from outside, not a bird's-eye view. It was inside the car, our car, the silver Chevy Impala, still parked outside, headlights dead. The three of us huddled in its seats like strangers frozen in place. Michelle let out a choking sob. We're here." Her hands shook toward the TV like she could block the image with her fingers. The screen flickered, cutting between that vision of us in the car and something else. A bedroom. Different from the motel room, but familiar in a way that my stomach turned. Pink curtains, a shelf of half-burnt candles, a picture frame crooked on the wall above a twin bed. Michelle's bedroom. "Turn it off! Turn it off! Turn it off!" she screamed, stumbling backward until she hit the peeling wall. The scene on the TV shifted again. Now the camera panned closer, toward the bed. Its blankets stirred. Something long moved underneath them, squirming in unnatural ripples. The frame rattled like the weight inside was too much for the posts to hold. Michelle gasped, shaking her head violently. "No, that's not real." But when the blankets peeled slowly away, the thing inside was already half out. At first, it looked like a person, but its skin was brittle paper, peeling and flaking into piles on the floor with each twitching movement. Its eyes were giant hollows, wet and black, like holes bored too deep for light. And its mouth was Michelle's. Her exact smile, stretched grotesque and wide, teeth doubled, lips splitting as it bent itself up. Michelle collapsed, her throat torn raw from a scream I didn't even recognize as human. Evan bolted forward and slapped the TV hard enough. The static bled out, the screen cracking in jagged lines. The image melted instantly, but the damage was done. Michelle was on her knees, rocking violently, sobbing, "It's mine! It's mine! It knows! It knows!" I bent to pull her up, but then the bed in the motel room groaned. The sheets shifted. Slowly, unmistakably, they lifted as though something had crawled underneath. Evan swore under his breath and staggered back toward the door, yanking at the handle. It wouldn't budge. No matter how hard he pulled, the knob spun freely in his hand, like someone had disconnected it from reality itself. The bed rose higher, the hump underneath sliding closer toward the edge. I grabbed Michelle under her arm and yanked her up, forcing her toward the corner. Her breaths came in wheezes, her nails sinking into my sleeve deep enough to tear through fabric. The sheets slithered down, and the creature crawled free. It was her, Michelle. Same tangled hair, same tear-glossy cheeks, but its eyes were those hollow pits, and where the rest of her face should have been was nothing but that stretched smile, splitting wider than bone should allow. The doppelganger grinned so wide it split its own cheeks open, dark fluid dribbling down like ink. It lifted its hand, reached toward the real Michelle's face. Snapping back, Evan did the only thing he could, grabbed the heavy lamp from the nightstand and swung. The bulb shattered against the creature's temple, shards scattering across the carpet. It shrieked, not with Michelle's voice, but with something deeper, something made of static and wind. It stumbled, twitching violently, skin cracking apart into flakes that fluttered down like burning paper. In the chaos, the door suddenly clicked. Evan didn't hesitate. He tore it wide, and light from the hallway spilled in. I dragged Michelle through, her legs nearly giving out beneath her. The three of us fell into the corridor gasping, slamming the door behind us. But just before it shut, I swear I caught one last glimpse of the doppelganger. It wasn't Ash anymore. It was smiling, lips split, its hollow eyes locked straight on me, as though it wanted me to know, your turn is coming. The door slammed, and silence claimed the hallway again. Michelle collapsed, shivering violently, arms locked around her knees. Evan's chest heaved, sweat dripping into his eyes. I leaned against the opposite wall, throat dry, my ears filled with the humming of whatever lived behind these walls. And then, another door clicked open across the hall. Room 209 this time. A faint golden glow leaked from inside, and a voice, so faint you'd think it was a memory, drifted out. It was Evan's voice, and it was calling for help. The voice came clear as a bell, Evan's voice, but not from his throat. It echoed down the hallway, faint and cracked, like it traveled through water. Help, please, help me. We froze. Michelle's eyes widened, still red from crying. She shook her head violently, grabbing Evan's arm. Don't go near it. That's not you." Evan's jaw clenched, but his body said otherwise. His legs moved toward room 209 before his brain had even caught up. Step by step, as if something in the sound hooked into his ribs and reeled him in. "Evan, stop," I hissed, yanking his sleeve. But when he turned toward me, I saw something I'd never seen in him before. Pure terror, undefined. Like the voice had cut straight through every wall he'd ever built. He whispered, "It's my dad." Those words chilled deeper than the motel's walls, because I knew just enough about Evan's dad to understand the weight in his throat. Years ago, before we were all friends, before even college, his father had died suddenly. Some heart failure no one saw coming. Evan didn't talk about it, not once. Any time Michelle or I even drifted close to the subject, he'd seal himself up, retreat into silence. And now, his father's voice called from the half-open doorway. The glow from inside shifted strangely, flickering between warmth and harsh fluorescent glare. As Evan stepped closer, the voice came again. "Evan, I need you." Michelle collapsed against the wall, clenching her hands around her temples. It's lying, don't listen." Her voice was shredded, hoarse from crying. But Evan was already pushing the door open. The room looked nothing like the last. No dingy motel furniture this time. Instead, it was a living room. Old carpet, sagging armchair, a TV stand stacked with VHS tapes. The air smelled faintly of cigars and stale beer. Family photographs hung crooked on the wall, their smiling faces blurred into distortion when I tried to focus. And there, across the room, half lit by the TV glow, sat a man in that armchair. Middle-aged, stocky frame, dark hair flecked with early gray. His posture was slouched, his hand holding a cigar stub, smoke curling into stagnant air. Evan's breath left him in a shudder. "Dad?" The man lifted his head. And God help me, he looked like every picture Evan had ever shown us. Recognition locked between them, a current too strong for me or Michelle to break. But his movements weren't right. When he shifted in the chair, his spine creaked too loudly, a visceral snap of wood or bones grinding. His eyes blinked one at a time, seconds apart. And though his mouth formed words, the sound came from everywhere, from the walls, the carpet, the air. "You left me here." Evan stumbled forward, torn between rage and grief. "No, I didn't. I was just a kid. I couldn't stop it." Michelle wailed, grabbing at my wrist with trembling hands. "Pull him back, please, before it's too late." I lunged for Evan, but the floor between us opened. Not a hole, not a trap. The carpet itself peeled away, stretching wide like jaws. Threads ripped into fibrous teeth, the foam beneath sloughing down to some endless pit. The only solid footing left led straight to the armchair. Evan turned, eyes glassy, shaking his head hard. "You don't understand. He blamed me. He always..." His voice cracked. "I have to explain. I have to tell him." The figure in the chair uncoiled. It rose too tall, too fast, its limbs elongating like rubber pulled to snapping. Its face melted at the edges, eyes sinking into voids, but the smile stayed, thick, wet lips stretching across its widening skull. Bone cracked under its skin as it leaned forward. "Yes, Evan," it hissed in his father's voice. "Tell me why you let me die." The pit in the floor moaned. Hands emerged from it. Dozens, maybe hundreds, flesh gray and slick like worms. They clawed high, straining for Evan's legs, thin fingers wrapping his ankles. He fought them, stomping wildly, screaming. I hurled myself down, yelling his name, grabbing his shoulders, but the hands were too many, their grip icy, pulling him closer toward the chair creature. Michelle scrambled to the nightstand in the corner, whatever passed for this room's anchor. Her trembling hands closed around a heavy picture frame, one of the distorted photos hanging askew. With a sob, she smashed it on the floor, glass exploding into fragments. The effect was instant. The hands stiffened, twitching like broken bugs before withdrawing back into the carpet. The pit snapped shut in a spasm of fibers, sealing as if it had never opened. Evan staggered free, gasping like a drowning man. We tore him backward, away from the thing in the armchair. For one last moment, its shape tilted toward us, face collapsing into black void, save for that jagged white grin. And then, everything blinked out. The room was empty again. Just a dull motel chamber with beige walls and 2 twin beds. But the smell of cigars still lingered. The door behind us cracked open on its own. Without another word, the 3 of us bolted back into the hallway. Evan collapsed against the opposite wall, head in his hands, shaking violently. His voice rasped. It wasn't him. It looked like him, but it wasn't. He dug trembling fingers into his knees. It knew everything. It knows everything about us. Michelle crouched next to him, pulling his hands free so she could see his face. "You can't listen, Evan. Do you hear me? Whatever this place is, it's feeding on us. It's trying to break us apart." Her voice shook but carried steel underneath. She was right. And yet the silence that followed her words was heavy, like the motel itself was listening. Because as soon as we fell still, another door clicked. Room 215 this time. And this time, it was my voice I heard. The voice floated through the hallway like thick smoke, curling around my ears. "Let me out." It was my voice. My exact tone, my exact cadence, whispered from behind the cracked door of room 215. My stomach turned to stone. Michelle was clutching Evan's arm, but both their eyes locked on me. They didn't say anything at first. They didn't need to. The way the blood drained from their faces told me what I already knew. This one was mine. Michelle shook her head, choking on breath. "Don't go in. Please, don't do it. That's exactly how it starts." But the door was waiting, and I felt it, like a wire tightening from my chest straight to that sliver of shadow inside the room. My legs buzzed with a compulsion I couldn't fight, same as Evan in his father's room. I managed to whisper, "If I don't, it'll keep calling." Neither of them had an argument ready. The air stood still around us. The hum in the motel walls ticked louder, like faint gears counting down. I touched the door handle. It was cold, too cold, like ice that had never melted. The door swung wide. Inside stretched not a motel room at all, but a classroom. My chest immediately tightened. The stink of dry erase markers filled the air, chalk dust ingrained deep into the floorboards, rows of plastic desks beneath buzzing fluorescent tubes. But unlike any school I remembered, the windows were bricked over from the inside, bricks dark with some damp growth crawling between cracks. At the far end of the room, on the chalkboard, was one message scrawled over and over in jagged handwriting. "You left them behind. You always leave them behind." My breath rattled in my chest.
I knew what this was. Back in high school, there was something I never talked about. Not to Evan, not to Michelle, not to anyone. A bus crash. There'd been a storm, rain smashing in torrents. I'd been supposed to ride with a group of students for a weekend event, but I'd backed out last minute. Too tired, too careless, too selfish to go. The bus had flipped off a slick back road. 3 kids didn't make it. Everyone told me it wasn't my fault. I wasn't even there. But the guilt lived in me like a parasite. The thought that if I'd just gone, maybe I could have stopped it. Maybe someone else would have been in my place.
And now, this room wasn't letting it die. The fluorescent lights stuttered, the desks filled. At first, only shadows sat in them, faint outlines of kids with no features. But with each flicker, more details bled in. Wet clothes plastered to their frames, bruises swelled on their faces, broken bones jutted through skin. Head wounds dripped thick black blood across the floor. They turned toward me as one. "Why didn't you come with us?" It was my voice again, spoken 100 times through their shredded throats. My knees buckled. I stumbled backward until I hit the cracked wall. I couldn't. I didn't know. My words fell into a sob. The kids rose from their seats in unison, bones cracking in chorus. Their faces blurred between shadow and ruin, their voices layering again in that hollow mimic of mine. "You left us." They began to walk forward, wet footprints growing across the stained floor. Not heavy, not thunderous, just soft, steady, deliberate, like the march of inevitability. Michelle screamed behind me, "Get out of there!" But my legs locked, my throat burned helplessly, because part of me agreed with them. Part of me thought I deserved this. The nearest student, a girl whose face was split down the middle from glass, reached for me. Fingers black with dried blood stretched close, so close I could feel the cold radiating even before contact. "No!" Evan's voice snapped through. His hand blindsided me in a violent pull, yanking me by the collar as he barreled into the room. I hit the hallway, gasping all at once, scrambled backward. Michelle slammed the door with both palms, her whole body weight against it. But the hands still clawed at that crack, nails screeching through the wood. Voices wailed in that chilling echo. Always leaving, always leaving, always leaving. The walls groaned. The floor under us rippled. If Michelle hadn't thought fast, picking up a busted exit sign from the wall and smashing the doorframe, I don't know what would have stopped them. Wood splintered, the frame warped, and the door sealed shut on its own, humming like it had never been touched. And just like that, silence. We collapsed together, breathless, trembling. For a long second, nothing in the hallway moved. No other doors clicked, none of the lights flickered. Just silence pressing into our chests like a hand. I buried my face in my palms, throat raw. Every piece of me shook, not just from terror, but from shame. Because the motel hadn't invented that guilt. It had dug into me, pulled it out, and worn it like flesh. Evan crouched in front of me, eyes bloodshot but steady. "This place knows us," he said. "It's tearing us apart, one by one." Michelle swallowed hard, her voice thin but sharp. "Then we don't give it what it wants. We stay together." But even as those words left her, the overhead lights snapped off in unison. The hallway drowned in red glow, faint and pulsing from exit signs that flickered deeper into the corridor. And from somewhere below, in the lobby, or maybe deeper, the jazz tune began again. Soft, danceable, and wrong.
This time, though, there was another sound layered beneath it. A chorus of high, thin voices humming along. Voices that sounded exactly ours. The humming grew louder as we crouched in the dim, red-lit hallway. Wrongly sweet jazz tangled with a choir of voices that should have been ours. It wound through the carpet, buzzed through the walls, and pressed cold into our bones. Evan was the first to stand. His fists were trembling, but his voice came steady with anger instead of fear. We're not going into another room. That's what it wants, right? To pull us apart one by one. If we stay out here, maybe it can't touch us the same way. Michelle shook her head. You saw the doors. They open whether we want them to or not. She was hugging her jacket around herself, shoulders shaking, eyes darting toward the blood-red glow stretching down either end of the hallway. If we don't move, it will move us. Her words carried too much truth. I forced myself up, still rattling from room 215, and pointed toward the far end of the corridor, where the exit sign pulsed faintly above a stairwell door. Downstairs, to the lobby. If we can just keep moving down, maybe we'll find a real exit. Evan wiped sweat from his forehead. Better than feeding it more nightmares. So we went. The carpet squelched under our shoes, each step louder than it should have been, as if the floor had grown damp. The numbers on the motel doors blurred more with every glance. I swore I saw symbols shifting underneath the brass, shapes I couldn't recognize, but felt pressing into my brain anyway.
The stairwell door groaned when Evan shoved it open, but blessedly, it opened. We stumbled inside, the thick air dropping instantly colder, metallic with rust. Concrete steps spiraled down, stretching into black. The faint jazz echoed from below, hidden under endless layers of static. I hated even saying the words, but I muttered, "We keep moving." We descended. The first flight made sense. Cold steps, iron railing, walls slick with moisture. But when we hit the landing and wound down the second, something shifted. The hum didn't echo from below anymore. It now pressed in from behind, above us. The farther down we went, the stronger it became from the direction we had just left, like the sound bent reality into a loop. Michelle slowed halfway down the third flight, her skin pale in the red glow. "We've been walking forever. Look at the landings. They're all the same." She was right. The concrete patchings, the stains on the walls, the rusted railing, it was all identical, like a tape rewinding itself. Evan cursed and broke into a run. His footsteps pounded ahead of us, echoing sharp in the stairwell. He barreled down flight after flight until his breath sawed ragged and he finally skidded to a stop. Another landing. Same stains, same shadows, same endless spiral below. He punched the wall, the sound ricocheting through concrete like a gunshot. "It's not letting us out!" The silence that followed his words wasn't silence at all. It was listening. And then the stairwell door, the one we had come in from, slammed shut somewhere above us. We didn't hear footsteps. We heard skittering, dragging bodies weighted with too many limbs. That sound chased down the stairwell, closer, folding into itself like insects crawling inside bone. Michelle sobbed and grabbed my hand without warning, her nails sharp against my skin. What do we do? The answer wasn't ours. The walls rippled, and in the concrete beside us, fresh doors formed, 6 of them. Lined up along the spiral, wooden motel doors cracking through the walls where concrete should have been, each one stenciled with a glowing red number. 209, 215, 203, and 3 more we hadn't seen before. 222, 230, and one numbered only with a single infinity symbol scratched into the plaque. Evan stumbled backward, shaking his head. No, no more rooms. But the skittering from above drew closer. Feet, claws, nails, an army crawling fast. The closest doorknob clicked, then another, then another. All 6 doors pulsed faintly, yellow light dripping out underneath as if each one hid something alive. Michelle whispered, "We have to choose." Her words hung in the stairwell like a curse. And then, as though the motel itself wanted to drive the point home, the stairwell shook. Pieces of concrete clattered, dust raining down. The railing warped against the wall, and through the cracks in the concrete, we saw them. Dozens of hollow eyes staring in, thin bodies twitching, waiting to pull themselves through. I knew then that staying in the stairwell meant being torn apart alive. Evan's fist balled. "We choose." Michelle turned toward me, her breath fast, her voice shaky but determined. But which one? None of us knew, and the doorknobs turned harder. The pulse of light grew brighter, as if we weren't choosing the rooms at all, as if the rooms were choosing us. The stairwell groaned and shook as if the entire motel were breathing. The 6 doors pulsed brighter in the damp concrete walls, light seeping from the seams. The skittering above was almost on us now, claws and limbs scraping, closing the distance. Evan grabbed the railing with white-knuckled fists. "We stay together, no matter what. Do you hear me? No matter what." Michelle's face was pale, streaked with tears. She nodded, clutching my arm hard enough to bruise. Together, always. But the motel had other plans. The closest door, marked 222, burst inward with a crack like splitting wood. A hand snaked out. It wasn't human, but it wore humanity like a glove. Long, pale fingers stretched too far, knuckles bending wrong. They latched onto Michelle's jacket and ripped her inside before I could even scream. Her shriek rang down the concrete spiral, cut short as the door slammed shut. "No!" I tore at the knob, but the door was gone. It had never been there in the first place, just smooth concrete. Evan's roar echoed the stairwell, animal and furious. He sprinted toward the infinity-marked door, pounding his fists against it. "Bring her back, you bastards!" But another door swung open, 230, and this time it was Evan who was seized. 2 pale arms snatched him, wrapping around his chest like steel cables. He struggled, shouting my name, but the thing dragged him in no matter how hard he jerked. The door slammed, concrete sealed. Nothing remained but bare wall and the echo of his voice. "Evan!" And then I was alone. The stairwell moaned. Something above finally began to spill through the cracks, thin bodies bending themselves wrong, their hollow eyes dripping black down the walls. The single door left unshaken was the one with the infinity symbol. Its knob turned on its own. The glow spilled out, not yellow like the others, but white. White so bright it pulsed like lightning. Every other sound fell silent. Even the crawling things paused. And in the deep cold of my chest, I understood without reason. This door wasn't like the others. This wasn't a room in the motel. This was the motel. The light widened, pulling me toward it. My legs strained to resist, toes catching against rough concrete, but gravity itself bent wrong and hurled me through that frame. The door slammed, and I wasn't in the stairwell anymore. I stood in a hallway that stretched in both directions forever, a perfect mirror of what I had just left above. Endless doors, endless exit signs, but mirrored into infinity. The carpet bled red, veins threading underneath it, the walls breathing in and out with the same steady hum that had followed us since the lobby. Every door clicked in perfect unison, and every voice behind them was mine. Hundreds of versions of me, whispering, screaming, laughing, crying, choking, a chorus of myself that rattled down the infinite hallway until I couldn't tell which throat was mine anymore. I dropped to my knees, clamping my hands to my head, but the voices only grew louder. You left them. You brought them here. You will never leave. From the distant dark of the hall, shapes stretched out of the walls, silhouettes of myself peeling away like shed skin. Each one staggered closer, grinning wide, empty-eyed, their steps perfectly in sync. The files of me stretched in either direction, multiplying, filling the corridor with hundreds of bodies made of my own face, all shuffling toward me. And through their chorus, beneath the static, one voice rose sharper, louder, whispering directly behind my ear. You are the motel. Michelle hit the ground hard when those pale hands dragged her through the door. The impact knocked the wind out of her, a choked gasp tearing from her chest as she sprawled across polished wooden boards. Not motel carpet, not concrete. A nursery. The walls were painted a pale yellow, peeling with water stains. Stuffed animals sat slumped along shelves, their glass eyes cloudy and cracked. At the far end of the room, a mobile dangled above a crib, slowly spinning though no air stirred. Its little paper moons and stars were stained brown, fluttering with every rotation. The hands that dragged her had vanished. The door she was pulled through was gone. Michelle forced herself upright. Her breaths were tiny, rapid jabs in her chest. She already knew where she was. Her worst fear wasn't a mystery like ours. It had shadowed her life since the accident she never forgave herself for. The crib creaked. Her legs shook violently as she stumbled closer, whispers rising from the mobile above. You left me, Michelle. Why didn't you check? Why didn't you stop it? Her throat locked. She reached the crib and looked inside. At first, she saw nothing, just old moldy blankets. And then the blankets bulged. Shapes shifted beneath, squirming in frantic motions, as if dozens of tiny bodies pressed just under the fabric, clawing upward for air. Thin whimpers leaked beneath the covers, cries layered into hundreds of broken pleas. Michelle screamed, tearing the blanket away. And the crib wasn't a crib at all. It was a pit filled with white-eyed infants, hundreds of them, their jaws unhinging far too wide as they wailed in voices that twisted into her own scream. Tiny hands stretched upward, black fingernails scratching at her skin as they dragged her toward the pit. Why didn't you save us, Michelle? Her shriek fractured into sobs. She clawed herself backward, nails ripping skin from her palms as she wrenched free of their tiny, cutting fingers. The pit pulsed, deepening, the cries swelling. She clamped her hands over her ears, screaming, I didn't know! I didn't know! But the babies laughed now, high, cruel, broken laughter that filled the nursery like rot. Michelle collapsed, curling into the corner, her voice breaking into one truth she had never wanted spoken aloud. I should never have been there. I shouldn't have lived. The crying stopped. Every head in the pit tilted at once.
white eyes unblinking, mouths yawning too wide, and they whispered as one, "Then stay with us forever." The crib split open, stretching wide, pulling her closer again as the arms raked for her body. Her scream was swallowed by the dark. When the hands yanked Evan through his door, he landed on rough gravel. At first, he thought he'd been thrown back outside to the parking lot. But when he stood and looked, the truth broke him.
It wasn't asphalt. It was the road. That road. The endless black stretch they'd driven before the motel appeared. The fields on each side were empty as bone, groaning faintly as if wind pushed through corpses. And ahead, headlights. A vehicle barreling straight toward him, horn blaring. He dove to the side, rolling into the grit just as the phantom car roared past, vibration rattling his bones. But when he stood, it was still there at the horizon, rushing at him again. Still honking, still blinding. "No," Evan whispered, shaking his head. "Not again. Not this road." In the lights, he swore he saw people standing. People he loved, people he recognized, their faces pale with accusation. His father, old friends, even Michelle and me. The horn blared again, and this time when it passed through him, pain lashed across his chest. He dropped to his knees, wheezing. Then, the car reset again, waiting at the horizon, coming for him. As it roared closer, words slithered between the harsh honks in his father's voice. "Why didn't you save me, son? Why didn't you stop it?" Evan screamed into the night, slamming his fists into the dirt. Each car strike burned deeper, cracked ribs groaning, blood rising in his throat. Yet, he kept standing, kept bracing. "You want me to confess?" he roared at the incoming lights. "Fine, I couldn't save anyone. Not you, not my mom, not my friends. I'm worthless. Is that what you want to hear?" The lights stopped. The car froze mid-barrel, headlights hovering in the dark, pressing against his skin like unblinking eyes. Silence claimed the road. And then, the horizon cracked like glass. 1,000 blinding lights poured out, stretching into infinity, every one screaming louder than the last. They closed in, dozens of phantom cars rushing at once. Devin dropped to his knees, arms outstretched as the wall of headlights bore down. "Come on, kill me then! I'm not running anymore! Do it!" The road trembled like a heartbeat. The cars roared. The lights swallowed him whole. As Michelle and Evan faced their rooms, I remained in the hallway of infinity. My copies stalked closer, grinning wide, hundreds of me moving in sync. And through them all, the words kept circling, deeper and deeper. "You brought them here. You will never leave. You are already home." The hallway of infinities trembled under my knees as the countless versions of me inched closer. Hundreds of my faces, all grinning, eyes emptied, arms outstretched. But somewhere beyond that suffocating chorus, I heard voices. Not echoes, real ones. Broken, fragile, but real. Michelle, screaming my name. Evan, coughing, wheezing, calling out in fury. They were close. The copies around me froze at once, their grins widening impossibly. The chorus of whispers fused into one sound. "They are yours.
yours to break, yours to bury. The hallway buckled, walls folding inward like the motel itself had grown impatient. Doors slammed in a ripple, one after the other, until the sound battered down the corridor in an endless wave. And then, without warning, new doors burst open all at once. From the left, Michelle fell into the hall, screaming, her jacket torn. She crawled frantically across the carpet, eyes wild, looking over her shoulder at something none of us could see. From the right, Evan stumbled in, coated in black dust, his body trembling as though he'd been beaten 1,000 times over. Blood streaked down his mouth, but his eyes were alive with a terrible fury. And me, stuck between my own echoing army. I staggered toward them, but the clones moved faster. They lurched at once, their bodies snapping, arms clawing outward. Michelle shrieked, "Run! Just run!" We bolted. The hallway stretched longer, no matter how fast we ran. Exit signs flickered, always too far ahead. Behind us, the sound of stomping feet rose as my reflections charged, filling the corridor wall to wall, ceiling to floor. Evan spat blood and roared, "It's leading us where it wants!" Desperation lit my chest like fire. For one dizzy second, I thought of stopping, of letting the horde overtake us. But Michelle's hand grabbed mine, and Evan shoved me forward from behind, and we kept running. And then, another door opened. The mark on it wasn't a number. It was all 3 of our names, written in dripping, smeared black script across the wood. The horde stopped. Hundreds of copies froze in perfect silence, faces twisted upward in expectation. We slowed, chest heaving, legs on fire. Michelle whispered, Don't open it." Evan snarled, "You think we've got a choice?" He gritted his teeth, tearing the knob. The door burst open on its own, dragging us inside like wind swallowing leaves. We crashed into the dark. The air inside was thicker, heavier, damp like the inside of lungs. The room stretched endlessly, walls blinking between motel wallpaper and pulsing flesh. The carpet beneath our shoes wasn't carpet anymore. It pulsed, sticky, like veins threading through it. At the center stood a single thing, a figure. Not the clerk from the lobby this time, not copies of us, something larger. It was shaped like a man, but its head stretched tall and narrow, bending up toward the ceiling until it disappeared into the shadows. Its arms, long and pallid, swayed gently at its sides like pendulums. It wore no clothes, no mask, just pale, stretched skin, glowing faintly, with veins thrumming under its surface. The worst part wasn't its size. The worst part was its face, because the face kept changing. One second, it wore Michelle's, the next, Evan's, then mine. Then 100 others, flickering between us all, a blur of identities it could wear at will. When it finally spoke, it didn't use one voice. It used all of ours, together. You cannot leave. You are the walls. You are the halls. You carry the motel within you now. Michelle sobbed, slapping her hands over her ears. Stop it! Evan snarled, Then tell us what the hell you are! It tilted its massive head until bones cracked like trees splitting. I am not what waits here. I am what you brought with you. Regret, guilt, the things that rot behind your ribs. We are only the house that makes them visible. My chest locked tight as those words filled me, because I knew it was true. The bus accident, Evan's father, Michelle's secret shame. None of this was created by the motel. It was all of us, stitched together, made flesh and walls and corridors. Evan's fists trembled. "Then kill us already!" The figure smiled widened, showing dozens of mismatched teeth that weren't its own, but ours. "Not kill, keep. This is your destination. This is forever." The walls rippled, doors opened in unison. Each one revealed not a room, but our nightmares. Michelle's nursery of laughter, Evan's endless headlights, my army of copies, all waiting, all hungry. Michelle shrieked and collapsed against me. "We can't do this! We can't!" But Evan turned, his jaw set hard. "No, listen. That thing said it's us. Then maybe the only way out," he looked at me, fire under his fear, "is to reject it, fight it." The figure swayed above, dozens of our faces splitting and crawling across its skull, and the doors began to close, one by one, sealing us inside. The core room was alive around us, pulsing with the guttural hum of the motel itself. The figure that wore all our faces loomed, its veined skin stretching too thin over its immense, endless body. Behind it, the doors slammed shut one after the other, sealing us in with our nightmares. Evan stood firm, his fists trembling with fury. "It's us, don't you see? It's everything we hate in ourselves, everything we never said out loud. It's feeding on us because we let it define us." Michelle clutched my sleeve, her breath ragged but eyes locked on the entity. "Then what happens if we stop?" The figure's heads, dozens of them, all morphing through our faces, turned in unison, grinning wide. "You do not stop. You surrender. You stay." Evan shook his head. "No, not this time." He stepped forward, and instead of swinging at it, instead of fighting, he screamed at it. "I'm not guilty for what happened. My father's death wasn't mine. That's not on me." The monster quivered. For the first time, it wavered, skin rippling, voices faltering. Michelle stumbled forward. Her voice was small but sharp through her sobs. "It wasn't my fault either. I was a kid. I couldn't save anyone. I couldn't even save myself." The monster howled, its chorus recoiling, the hallways behind it peeling away to reveal writhing, endless dark. It turned its faces to me, hollow eyes widening. "You brought them here," it hissed through my own voice. And maybe I had. Maybe I was the reason we'd taken the wrong turn, the one who hadn't insisted we stop, the one who hadn't fought harder to leave. But standing there, looking at Michelle broken, looking at Evan defiant, I realized the truth. It wasn't about fault. It was about choice. We had a choice in what we carried forward and what we left to rot. I forced my voice out, louder than the buzzing hum in my skull. "You don't own me. You don't us. You're just walls made out of guilt and fear, but you're not us." For a moment, the room froze. And then the screaming began. The figure split down the middle, a great vertical seam tearing through its chest. Light burst out, blinding white, a flood that washed the hallways into nothing. I heard the motel's walls collapse all at once, their hum breaking like a power grid frying out. The floor shuddered beneath, and the air shrieked with the dying breath of something too big to belong to this world. And then, silence. When my eyes opened, we were standing on asphalt. Night above us, stars returning. The Chevy Impala parked crooked on the side of a dark, empty road. Evan was beside me, pale with shock but alive. Michelle leaned against the car, tears streaked down her face, gasping as if she'd just been resuscitated. The field stretched empty on both sides, not endless anymore, just silent farmland under the wide American sky. Behind us, no motel, no lights, no doors. We didn't talk for a long time, not as we got back into the car, not as Evan turned the key and, mercifully, the engine started without hesitation. The headlights carved the road once more, but this time the horizon looked real. Eventually, Michelle whispered, "Did it end?" No one answered, because none of us knew. Weeks later, back home, I tried to forget. Therapy, late-night walks, conversations that never scratched past the surface. But sometimes, when I dream, I hear the faint scratches of doors unlocking. Sometimes, in a mirror, I see a smile that isn't quite mine. And sometimes, when the hum of power lines hangs low, I hear the jazz tune again, soft and warped, drifting in the static. The motel's gone, but I don't think it ever really let us leave.